They spent the rest of January and into mid-February just stuck. We know that on their way back, at least one of the boys became extremely ill and died. He was buried at sea. In other words, his body was wrapped in linen and thrown over the side of the ship. Colon was a masterful navigator. And it was only because this dude had like some sort of magnetic field that told him where the heck he was on the globe was that he was able to get back to Spain. So instead of heading back towards the Canary Islands, which was the point in order to get food and supplies, he ended up way farther north than he intended. He still, though, ended up going towards the Azores, which were now part of Portugal. As they got closer to the Azores, they encountered these massive storms. It is written that in that time, in 1493, these storms had never been seen before. It was insane. There had been about 25 ships off of Flanders that had sunk because of these storms. But the storm was so bad that Colon had prayed to the Lady of the Angels and in order to ask her to please save them. We can also imagine that the indigenous boys also prayed to their gods to free them from these horrible storms. I imagine that they were completely terrified. They would never see their families, their friends, anybody ever again, and to die with all of these strangers in the middle of nowhere. They managed to arrive safely on one of the Azores island named Santa Maria. He had promised the Lady of the Angels that he would make a mass or proclaim a mass, una misa, in order to give thanks for their safe arrival. So he sent a group of men in order to pray and perform mass. But the people on this island of the Azore island of Santa Maria were very suspicious as to how in the world did these men survive these massive storms. So as the Columbus's men performed the mass, they were captured by the people of the island. They took them as prisoners. So when they didn't return to the ship by 11 a.m., Colon went out to find them. He left the boys on the ship. They didn't escape. They didn't know where they were. He went back for them. And he was able to convince Juan de Castañeda to give him his men, and he was able to continue his voyage. However, he then ended up in another storm. And this storm then made him arrive in the one place he did not want to go to, which was Lisbon, or Lisboa, Portugal. The captain of the port of Lisboa told Colon, you gotta come with me, you gotta go declare yourself to Juan II of Portugal. And he was honest. He told them, look, I was exploring for the kings of Spain, and here's all my documentation. But the captain of the port wanted to take his documentation, and Colon said, no, I will die on my ship. I will not give you anything. So the captain of the port said, fine, I'll take you to see the king. As this is going on, the boys were probably looking at their surroundings, amazed to see the first European city that a Native American had ever laid eyes on. And they had to wait a while at port because they needed an invitation from Juan to actually go see him. The invitation finally came on the 9th of March, 1493. He was taken to see the king with the indigenous boys. We know that at least 2 of them were taken into Juan's court. Juan was suspicious of Colon because he thought that he had gone to Africa instead of this whole new world. He placed bowls of beans in front of the boys. He asked them to come in one by one, and he, through signs, had them map out their islands. It is said that the boys were extremely confident. They quickly understood that what he wanted them to show him, and each boy put down the exact number of beans for the islands. He tried to explain in his language, and the king could only just listen. He didn't understand anything. And we know this because Colon described this situation in his letter that he wrote to the kings, in a letter dated March 14th, 1493. King John accused him of violating the Treaty of Alcazovas, made in 1479, giving Portugal the rights of the African coast. The only thing that remained in Spanish territory was the Canary Islands. Colon, he wasn't scared of Juan. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know anything about no treaty. I went on a mission and I got to Asia because he thought he went to Asia. He died thinking he went to Asia, even though I'm pretty sure he didn't die thinking he went to Asia. He just pretended. But he was like, no, I was in Asia. I wasn't in Africa. What are you talking about? And at the end, John couldn't prove where the hell Colon had been. So he's like, fine. And he let him go. He was able to take the indigenous boys with him, but on the trip from Lisbon to Sevilla, two more of the kids died. He finally sailed into harbor on March 15th, 1493. At port, Colon was informed that the kings were in Barcelona. He decided to go by sea. And he was then escorted to see the royal highnesses, including the boys. The boys would have been able to view the coastline of Spain and Barcelona in particular as they slowly sailed into the harbor. From the harbor, it was a short distance to the Palacio del Rey. We can just imagine how the crowds stared at them as they walked through the streets towards the palace. And it was on these very steps that King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella received not only Colon, but the 7 indigenous boys who survived the trip. It is believed that here is where the boys were educated and learned to read and write in Spanish, and also became the first Native Americans to learn a European language. They were dressed in the finest clothes of the day. Being here affected the way they saw their family and homeland.